Ahoy! Palia gives you a fair bit of guidance when it comes to early steps, but they don't really mention a few things that you may want to be aware of as a beginner and some potential mistakes that you may want to avoid. Some of them can end up costing you a lot of resources or time. So with this video I hope to make your journey a little bit smoother. The first mistake is one that you may have already heard about, but just in case you haven't, I'm gonna mention it here, and that's not repairing your tools. Once you've upgraded your tools for the first time, they have a durability meter. And you would probably think that if you run out of durability, you simply can't use the tool until you repair it. That is not the case. Instead, the tool downgrades, which can be quite an unpleasant surprise. Fortunately, there are multiple ways to repair your tools. The moment you first upgrade a tool, you automatically get the recipe for repair parts, which you can craft with a few resources required, and then use to repair your tool. If you've built a repair station in your house, you can repair there, but if that's not the case for you, that's fine too, or if you don't have the resources for repair parts yet, you can just go into town instead, and at Sifu's workshop next to the tavern, you can interact with the anvil. Here you can repair your tools either for gold or for repair parts. As a little bonus tip to this tip, if you're planning to upgrade a tool, then you don't actually need to repair it beforehand, it will be fully repaired once it's upgraded. But speaking of upgrading tools, that can sometimes be a bit of a beginner mistake in itself. The very early upgrade to the standard level is usually worth it, but the upgrades beyond that aren't necessarily super important in early game, with the exception of the axe, which allows you to chop bigger trees, and the pick to the fine level, the blue level, so that you can gather the rarest resources. Other upgrades are only really a priority if you're planning to use that specific tool a lot and you want to do that activity a lot. Otherwise, there are often better ways to spend your gold, for example on more fields or more crafting and refining stations. The next mistake is not using your focus properly. Focus is a resource that increases the experience you gain for all the different activities you do. You gain focus by eating food. It's very easy to see what counts as food for this because it will have a pink arrow next to it in your inventory. You can also see your focus bar both in your inventory and in the top left at all times. Once this bar is empty, you no longer have the bonus, and ideally you want to eat food at this point. It is very easy to miss this bar running out. There's a distinct sound that you can hear when your focus just ran out, and it sounds like this. So you want to try and pay attention to that, or at least occasionally look at the bar. And that brings us right to the next mistake, which kind of ties in here, which is not using your Renown properly. Renown is a resource that you get very frequently, especially for interacting with villagers and doing quests. There are 3 different things to use Renown for, and you kind of want to balance them out. To keep it spoiler free, I'm not going to talk about one of them because it unlocks a little bit later into the game, but it's also not really important in the beginning anyways. The 2 that are important are the Dragon and the Phoenix Shrine. You can't use them right away, they unlock a little bit into the game, but fairly early on. And the Phoenix Shrine gives you an increased focus bonus effect. So for the focus you have, you get more extra XP on the activities you do. Right at the start, this is definitely the best one to invest into. The increase that you get scales down the more you invest into it, so there are diminishing returns at some point. The Phoenix Shrine is literally where you spawn at the start of the game, so it's gonna be easy to find. The other one is a little bit easier to miss, which is the Dragon Shrine. It is just east of your housing plot, a little bit down the road, and on this shrine you can also offer your Renown. In return, you get a maximum focus increase. That may not sound that useful in the beginning. Eventually, you end up making food that gives you more focus than your initial focus cap. So if you have food that gives you 200 focus back and you only have a maximum of 100 focus, obviously that's going to waste. So if you get to the point where your food exceeds your focus cap, you should definitely consider increasing the focus cap at the Dragon Shrine. So you want to balance out your spending between both shrines, but you don't really need to hold onto much Renown most of the time. Another beginner mistake is not subscribing to this YouTube channel and missing out on the tips that I'll be posting in the next days. Jokes aside, it would help me out a lot, and as you can see down in the description, I have already posted timestamps for this video, but they only work once I have 1,000 subscribers, so if you help me get there, you get timestamps in return. The next mistake is almost a bit of a cruel one, and it's accidentally buying furniture from Tish's store. If you are in the furniture shop, there are various furniture items around, and the interact button is the same as the one to interact with Tish herself. When you interact with any of these items and you have enough gold, there is no confirmation pop-up or anything, you just right away end up buying that item, which can cost you hundreds or even thousands of gold. As a new player, that can definitely hurt. And speaking of talking to Tish, the next mistake is not interacting with villagers. Palia doesn't initially make this super clear, but a lot of the later quest progression revolves around interacting with villagers and building relationships with them to unlock new quests and progress other quests. Outside of special interactions for quests, there are 2 ways you can interact with the villagers. The first one is talking to them. This can be done daily on the in-game daily timer. If you want to learn how the in-game and real-time timer systems work for all different activities in the game, then I will link you a video about that right here. But for this video, I'll give you a quick summary for the relationship specifically. So a day in-game is an hour in real time, so you can talk to the villagers once per hour. But separate from that, you can also give gifts to the villagers, and this can be done once per day in real time, so every 24 hours. The villagers will request specific things, but there is a maximum of 4 requests from them, and you usually won't get all of them in the first week anyways. And outside of that, you can still give them more gifts. I would recommend doing this because it increases your friendship level further. You can't just gift every item to every villager, they all have specific preferences. I'm not going to give too many spoilers here, but I will tell you that in town you will definitely find people who like food, who like flowers, and who like copper ore. Some items in Palia can be hard to come by in the beginning, and you may not know where to find them. Fortunately, there is a way around that, which is using item requests. You can press O and then in the second tab, you can request items. And many players may think, well, no one's ever gonna fill that request anyways. But there are in fact quite a few reasons for other players to fulfill your requests, especially if you're requesting stuff from the early zone. So definitely don't hesitate to make use of this feature. Keep in mind though that there is a maximum of requests you can do per day, and also you need to open the items once you've received them to actually get them in your inventory. The next one is a mistake that you can't really know about, so I wouldn't necessarily call it a mistake as such, but it's definitely worth knowing. I would highly recommend getting the basic refining stations going early, especially the smelter and the sawmill. You do need some minimal skill levels in foraging and mining to unlock the recipes, but it's well worth it because if you start refining resources there, you'll not have to wait nearly as much later on. Refining can sometimes take over an hour if you're crafting a lot of resources, so you want to spend that time doing other things while the refining stations are doing their job. However, it is worth knowing that there's also a refining station limit. You can't just place an infinite amount of different refining stations. You can just pick them up and put them in your storage and put down another one, but you can't have all of them out at the same time, at least not until you've purchased further licenses to place more. So for example, I was running 2 smelters in the beginning, one for stone and one for copper, and then eventually put one away because I didn't really need it anymore and other refining stations became more important. A mistake that you'll definitely regret if you ever end up in that situation is not having smoke bombs on you. This is because there are a lot of common bugs that always fly around, and that's usually what you find if you're specifically bug hunting, but there are also some very rare bugs that you may run into, and if you run into one of them without having your smoke bomb on you, then that would be extremely frustrating. And this is especially important while mining or chopping down trees, because if you clear one of those resource nodes, sometimes a bug can spawn underneath, a specific bug that only spawns from doing this activity. When you see one of those, you definitely want to be able to catch it. Palia throws a lot of different activities at you at the start, and it doesn't really make it obvious what is important or what to prioritize. A mistake that you can make in that regard, that I definitely made in the beginning, is not making full use of the field that you get. Harvesting levels very slowly in the beginning, but it ramps up very quickly once you get to a certain point, so it's very worth getting to that point because in the endgame this is the easiest way to make tons of gold. So the sooner you start planting, the better. You won't have all the different seeds in the beginning, but you can just buy them from Zaki's general store. If you want to learn more about harvesting and how it works in detail and how to optimize it, then I will link you a guide right here that I made specifically about harvesting only. I have one more mistake for you to avoid, but before that a quick reminder to consider subscribing and clicking the bell if you'd like to get notified of future tips and also want to support this channel. My last tip is to avoid mining the rocks and cutting down the trees and especially bushes around your house if you like the look. Different from other resources in the game, they don't grow back or respawn. You can place fully grown trees later, but as far as I know, you're at least not getting the option to grow bushes or place rocks for a long time, if at all. I hope this was useful information for you. Tomorrow we'll be comparing different ways to make gold. Thank you very much for watching. Sloth out.